Hello everyone, John A.G. here. Welcome back to my channel, Aurex. If you haven't yet, subscribe to my channel. In this channel, you will find the real information, real market updates that everyone cannot tell you. So please subscribe this channel and love you all of my subscribers for your support. And please watch this video till the very end, because YouTube will not push my videos to more people and add many things related to this topic and make this speech fully professional, emotional, human touch, and powerful. My friends, we have arrived. The moment we have been warning about for years, the mathematical inevitability that Wall Street laughed at, the crisis that politicians swore could never happen on American soil, is finally, undeniably here. Today is Friday, May 8th, 2026, and today, the financial world as we have known it for the last 55 years has effectively ceased to exist. This morning, in an unprecedented, desperate, and frankly terrifying emergency session, the Federal Reserve, in absolute coordination with the United States Treasury, enacted a mandate that will be written about in history books for centuries. They have frozen the price of gold. By executive decree and brutal regulatory force, all trading of gold futures on the COMEX has been halted. The spot price has been artificially capped and frozen at exactly $3,000 per ounce. Major banks have been barred from quoting higher prices. Brokerages have suspended trading on precious metals exchange-traded funds. Accounts are locked. The exits are barricaded. Why? Because if they had not pulled the plug, if they had not shattered the thermometer, gold was about to go completely parabolic, and the United States dollar was about to enter a terminal, irreversible death spiral. Wall Street is currently facing a total, unmitigated currency crisis. As I speak to you right now, screens across the globe are flashing red. Panic is ripping through the corridors of power from Washington to London, and the long-held illusion of absolute fiat control has been irreparably shattered. But why today? Why the seemingly arbitrary number of $3,000? And what does a freeze on a yellow metal actually mean for the money sitting in your checking account right this very second? I need you to listen to me very closely, because the answer to those questions reveals a terrifying reality about the foundation of our entire society, and what I am about to explain will dictate whether your family survives the coming decade or gets swept away by the flood. To truly understand the magnitude of what happened today, you have to understand what gold actually is. Gold is not just a shiny rock. It is not just a relic of barbarism, as Keynesian economists love to claim on cable news networks. Gold is the ultimate incorruptible measure of a currency's health. It is the financial world's most accurate, unforgiving lie detector. For years, the paper markets, the futures contracts, the derivatives, the unbacked promises were used to suppress the true value of physical gold. The establishment needed to keep gold prices contained because a soaring gold price is a blaring, inescapable siren that the fiat currency is burning. It is the canary in the coal mine, and our central bankers have been pumping toxic gas into the shaft for decades. They did this through a system of leverage that borders on criminal. For every 1 ounce of actual physical gold sitting in a vault, there were sometimes hundreds of paper claims traded on the exchanges. It was a game of musical chairs played with the wealth of nations. But in the early months of 2026, that suppression mechanism fundamentally broke. The music stopped. With the eruption of conflict in the Middle East, the severe disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz, and oil prices surging 25% above their baseline, inflation did not just return, it roared back with a vengeance that made the 2020s look like a minor hiccup. And what did the smart money do? What did the sovereign nations do? They ran for the exits. They ran for the only asset that carries zero counterparty risk. They demanded their physical gold. When gold shattered the $3,000 mark earlier this year, it was not just a psychological milestone. It was a structural breaking point. The massive chasm between the amount of paper gold traded on the exchanges and the actual physical bullion sitting in the vaults became painfully, undeniably obvious to the entire world. A silent run on the physical vaults began. The Federal Reserve's decision today to freeze the price at $3,000 is an act of pure, unadulterated desperation. It is a modern-day equivalent of economic martial law, echoing the dark ghosts of Executive Order 6102 in 1933, when the government confiscated the citizens' gold. By halting the trade, they are desperately trying to stop the global realization that the emperor has no clothes. They are trying to stop a catastrophic dumping of United States treasuries by terrified foreign creditors who realize they are holding completely worthless paper. But if you think this is just a Wall Street problem or a central banking problem, I need to wake you up right now. Freezing the price of gold to stop a currency crisis is exactly like freezing a thermometer to cure a raging fever. It does not heal the patient. It only guarantees the disease will go untreated until it is utterly fatal. By outlawing the true price of gold, the government has officially signaled to the world that the dollar has failed. How did we get here? How does the most powerful economic engine in the history of human civilization find itself issuing emergency freezes to protect its own money? The answer is arrogance, and the weapon of choice was debt. As we stand here in May 2026, the United States national debt is aggressively pushing toward the unimaginable threshold of $40 trillion. I need you to pause and truly comprehend that number, $40 trillion. It is a figure so vast, so completely detached from physical reality or the productive capacity of our citizens, that the human brain actually struggles to process it. For decades, we lived under the mass delusion that debt did not matter. We were told by modern monetary theorists, academic economists, and slick politicians that because we possessed the world's reserve currency, we possessed a magic wand. We believed we could print our way out of any problem, any war, any pandemic, any recession. We spent billions, then trillions on endless overseas conflicts that yielded nothing but sorrow. We bailed out corrupt, over-leveraged banking systems in 2008, rewarding the very architects of the crisis. We printed our currency into oblivion during the pandemic, expanding the M2 money supply at a rate never before seen in the history of peacetime economics, flooding the zone with unbacked currency while simultaneously shutting down the global supply chains that produced the goods that money was supposed to buy. Every single time the system wobbled, the Federal Reserve's only answer was to inject more liquidity, lower the interest rates to zero, print the money, buy the bonds, kick the can down the road. But every monetary system carries within it the seeds of its own destruction. The architecture that granted the United States dollar its extraordinary global privilege, the ability to serve as the world's primary medium of exchange, demanded that we export our dollars worldwide. Over decades, this process inflated the stock of dollar-denominated liabilities relative to the actual productive capacity backing them. We hollowed out our manufacturing base. We shipped our factories overseas to the lowest bidder. We transitioned from a proud empire that built tangible things, that engineered wonders, to a financialized empire that merely shuffled paper and financed things. We became an economy that exported digital fiat and imported real, tangible goods. And the math, finally, brutally, caught up with us. With debt nearing $40 trillion, the interest payments alone on that debt have eclipsed the entire national defense budget. Let the sheer horror of that reality sink in. We are now borrowing money just to pay the interest on the money we already borrowed. It is a classic, undeniable Ponzi scheme, operated at the highest sovereign level, and the world is finally calling our bluff. When inflation surged over the last few years, the Fed tried to hike rates to fight it. But in doing so, they triggered a sovereign debt crisis of their own making. They realized, far too late, that you cannot sustain a $40 trillion debt load at 5 or 6% interest rates without completely defaulting on the obligations, or firing up the printing presses to hyperinflate the difference. The global market realized this too. The dollar became structurally overvalued by upwards of 20%, held up only by the ghosts of past hegemony, military might, and the lack of a unified alternative. But wait, what I am about to tell you next is the exact reason why the Federal Reserve panicked today. Because while Washington was paralyzed by its own debt trap, the alternative had already arrived at our doorstep, fully armed and ready to dismantle the dollar standard. This currency crisis is not just a domestic mathematical error. It is a geopolitical earthquake of epic proportions. The fatal miscalculation was made years ago when the West decided to weaponize the global financial system. When the sovereign assets of the Russian central bank were frozen in 2022, it sent a seismic shockwave through the capitals of every non-Western nation on Earth. The message sent from Washington was crystal clear, and it was devastating. If you cross the United States, your reserves, the generational wealth of your nation, stored in United States treasuries, can be deleted with a single keystroke. In that exact moment, the dollar ceased to be a neutral reserve asset and became a geopolitical weapon of compliance. And the rest of the world immediately decided they needed a new shield. Enter the BRICS nations. Over the last 4 years, China, Russia, India, Saudi Arabia, and a rapidly growing coalition of emerging markets have executed the most aggressive, systematic accumulation of physical gold in modern human history. Central banks have been purchasing well over 1,000 tons of gold annually, draining the Western vaults in London and New York, quietly repatriating their national wealth, and aggressively preparing for the collapse of the Fiat system. They were not buying gold to make a quick trade on the COMEX. They were not speculating on price action. They were buying gold to secure their sovereign survival. They were backing their local currencies and trade agreements with the one historical asset that cannot be sanctioned, cannot be inflated away by a foreign power, and cannot be frozen by the United States Treasury. As we entered 2026, the global economy fractured into competing hostile blocs. The Middle East conflict acted as the ultimate catalyst. As energy prices skyrocketed and supply chains choked, the traditional petrodollar recycling system, where oil producers took their dollar profits and dutifully bought U.S. treasuries to fund our deficits, completely broke down. They didn't want our paper anymore. They wanted hard assets. They wanted the gold. The Fed's freeze today is a direct, terrified response to this international run on the bank. The East has called the West's bluff. They demanded physical delivery of gold at a pace the fractional reserve bullion banks simply could not sustain. To prevent a catastrophic, highly public default on the COMEX, where the exchanges would have to admit they do not have the gold they sold, the government stepped in and shut the entire game down. They changed the rules because they were losing the game. But geopolitics is just the macro level. Let me bring this down to your kitchen table. Let me tell you exactly what this freeze means for your family, your community, and your survival in the coming months. Because there is a profound, devastating human tragedy unfolding right outside our doors today. A currency crisis is not just lines on a chart or numbers on a screen. It is a visceral, deeply emotional trauma that tears at the very fabric of society. It destroys trust, it destroys hope, it turns neighbors against each other and breeds a deep, abiding resentment. Think about the retired factory worker who spent 40 years putting away a portion of his paycheck every single week. He woke up early, he sacrificed, he played by the rules. He trusted the system. He accumulated a pension, believing it would afford him peace, dignity, and a quiet life in his twilight years. When a currency collapses, that dignity is stolen in the middle of the night by invisible thieves. Inflation is the most regressive, cruelest tax ever devised by man. It does not take your money directly from your bank account where you can see it. It takes the purchasing power of that money. It takes the steak off your dinner table and replaces it with processed grain. It forces the elderly to stand in the aisle of a pharmacy, looking at soaring prices, crying as they are forced to choose between heating their homes in the winter and buying the medication that keeps their hearts beating. For the young families trying to build a life in 2026, the American dream has been walled off by an invisible, impenetrable barrier of debased currency. Housing affordability has completely vanished. A starter home now requires a lifetime of crushing, multi-generational debt. The cost of basic everyday groceries, eggs, milk, bread, meat, has disconnected entirely from the stagnant wages of the working class. When you debase the currency, you fundamentally debase the culture. You breed anger and despair. People feel in their bones that the system is rigged against them because, mathematically and structurally, it is. The Cantillon effect guarantees that those closest to the money printer, the massive banks, the hedge funds, the political elite, receive the new, freshly printed money first, inflating their asset prices and enriching themselves. Meanwhile, the working class receives the money last, bearing the full, crushing brunt of the resulting inflation. Today's freeze of the gold price is a slap in the face to every hardworking citizen on this planet. It is the government essentially saying, "We have mismanaged your wealth. We have destroyed the currency through our own hubris and greed, and now we are going to hide the evidence so you cannot protect yourselves." Imagine walking into a grocery store today. The prices are changing by the week, sometimes by the day. You feel a creeping, suffocating anxiety every time you swipe your debit card, wondering if the labor you traded your precious, finite time on Earth for is still enough to sustain your life. That anxiety is the human manifestation of a dying currency. It is a tragedy born of supreme arrogance. Now, you might be asking yourself, if the government froze the price, doesn't that stop the panic? Doesn't that fix the problem? What I'm about to explain is the darkest secret of the banking sector today, and it is why Wall Street is currently in absolute freefall. The freeze at $3,000 has triggered a massive systemic liquidity crisis across the entire financial sector. For years, hedge funds, institutional investors, and algorithm-driven trading desks treated gold as just another tradable asset, easily shorted, easily manipulated through paper derivatives. They built hyper-complex portfolios, assuming the dollar would always remain supreme, and that U.S. Treasuries would always remain the ultimate risk-free asset upon which all other valuations were based. Today, that risk-free return has become return-free risk. With the gold window effectively slammed shut, institutional capital is trapped. Wall Street is suddenly realizing that their multi-billion-dollar portfolios of bonds, stocks, and overinflated tech valuations are denominated in a currency that is actively melting. But they cannot pivot to the traditional safe haven to preserve their wealth because the government has frozen the exits. They are trapped in a burning building with the doors chained shut. This has sparked a terrifying psychological contagion. The psychology of the market has fundamentally broken. If the government can unilaterally freeze the price of the world's oldest money, what stops them from freezing your bank account? What stops them from imposing draconian capital controls to prevent your dollars from fleeing the country? What stops them from instituting bail-ins, a law already on the books, where your deposits are legally reclassified as unsecured loans to the bank, and your money is seized to recapitalize a failing institution? The panic we are seeing on the trading desks today is the cold, hard realization that the rules of the game have been permanently altered. The era of financialization, where wealth was magically created by moving paper back and forth, by executing stock buybacks with cheap debt, is dead. We are violently returning to an era of tangible reality, an era where if you do not physically hold it in your hand, you do not actually own it. We must also talk about the profound psychology of what it means to live through a currency crisis. For over half a century, since President Richard Nixon temporarily suspended the convertibility of the dollar into gold in 1971, a temporary measure that has incredibly lasted 55 years, entire generations have been born, lived, and died without ever knowing what sound money truly is. We have been conditioned from birth, through our schools, our media, and our institutions, to believe that money is a product of the state. We have been taught that its value comes from a treasury seal, a presidential signature, or the decrees of central bankers sitting in boardrooms. But natural economic law cannot be suspended forever by legislative fiat. You cannot legislate the laws of physics, and you cannot print wealth. Money, true money, must be a reliable store of value across time and space. It must require energy, labor, and scarcity to produce. It cannot be created out of thin air by a committee of unelected bureaucrats pressing a button on a keyboard. The psychological shock of this 2026 freeze is forcing a mass global awakening. People are waking up to the terrifying reality that their savings accounts are not safe vaults of wealth, but melting ice cubes left out in the summer sun. They are realizing that their government bonds are essentially certificates of guaranteed purchasing power confiscation. This awakening is deeply painful. It requires letting go of deeply held beliefs about the stability of our institutions and the competence, or even the benevolence, of our leaders. It requires facing the harsh, unfiltered reality that the cavalry is not coming to save us, because the cavalry is the very entity that burned the village down in the first place. But within this immense pain, within this chaos, lies a profound opportunity for empowerment. Once you understand that the fiat system is failing, you can step outside of it. You can take ownership of your financial destiny, rather than leaving it in the hands of those who view you as mere collateral damage in their geopolitical games. So, where do we go from here? What do you, the viewer sitting at home, watching this video right now, do in the face of a collapsing currency and an overreaching government desperate to maintain control? First, you must recognize that this freeze is entirely temporary in its effectiveness. Governments can mandate a price, but they cannot mandate value. History proves this time and time again, from the fall of Rome to Weimar Germany to Zimbabwe to Venezuela. Black markets will immediately emerge. In the real world, outside the control of the COMEX and the regulatory gaze of the Treasury, physical gold will trade at its true, unfettered premium. We will likely see physical premiums of 50%, 100%, or more above the official $3,000 frozen price. If you already hold physical precious metals, hold them tightly. Bury them if you have to. Do not surrender them to a system that is desperate for your real wealth to prop up their failing paper paradigm. Second, you must deeply understand the absolute necessity of hard assets. In a currency crisis, paper wealth evaporates into the ether, but physical reality remains. agricultural land, commodities, productive businesses, energy resources, and decentralized assets that exist entirely outside the traditional banking system all become vital financial lifeboats. You must position your wealth in assets that governments cannot print, cannot digitally freeze, and cannot easily confiscate. You must become your own central bank, completely independent of their failing architecture. Third, we must cultivate community and profound self-reliance. When macro systems fail at this magnitude, microsystems become our primary survival mechanisms. The strength of your local community, your ability to produce tangible value, your ability to grow food, purify water, and your network of trusted, awake individuals will be vastly more valuable than a bank account full of rapidly depreciating digital digits. I warn you now, with every fiber of my being, the Federal Reserve's actions today are not a solution. They are a glaring symptom of terminal systemic failure. In the coming weeks and months, they will try to introduce central bank digital currencies as the ultimate convenient solution to the crisis they themselves created. They will present it as a safe, secure, government-backed alternative to the chaos. Do not fall for it. It is a trap. A CBDC is not money. It is a system of absolute control. They will attempt to chain us to a programmable, surveilled ledger where every transaction is monitored, tracked, and graded. If you buy too much meat, if you travel too far, if you support the wrong political cause, your ability to spend your own money can be turned off with a click of a mouse. We must fiercely, unapologetically, and universally resist this push for total financial control. We must starve the digital beast and demand physical, unprogrammable freedom. My friends, I started this channel because I saw the writing on the wall. I saw the debt compounding at an exponential, terrifying rate. I saw the geopolitical plates shifting away from Western hegemony. I saw the deliberate erosion of the middle class and the silent, insidious theft of inflation destroying the American family from the inside out. I want to look you in the eye right now through this lens and tell you this. Do not despair. Do not give in to the fear that they are trying to pump into your living rooms. Yes, the system is crumbling. Yes, Wall Street is in absolute chaos. Yes, the Federal Reserve has resorted to unprecedented authoritarian measures by freezing the price of gold and trying to blindfold the public. But the fall of a corrupt, unsustainable monetary system is not the end of the world. It is the clearing of the dead wood. It is the necessary, purifying fire that allows new, healthy, honest growth to emerge from the ashes of fiat currency. Throughout history, empires have fallen. Currencies have collapsed to zero, corrupt leaders have been swept away by the tide of history, and yet humanity endures. The human spirit is infinitely resilient. Those who prepare, those who understand the truth of what is happening behind the curtain, and those who aggressively anchor themselves in real, tangible value will not just survive this massive wealth transfer, they will thrive on the other side of it. You have the power to protect your bloodline. You have the power to step out of the burning building before the roof collapses. This is why I ask you to share this video immediately with everyone you love, everyone you care about, and even those you don't. The mainstream financial media is currently working overtime, spinning lies and trying to frame this freeze as a temporary market stabilization measure. They are lying to your face. They are trying to keep the sheep calm and complacent in the pen while the wolves loot the barn one last time. The algorithm does not want this truth out there, which is why your support, your likes, and your sharing are the only ways this message breaks through the noise of their multi-billion-dollar propaganda machine. We are in the fight of our lives for our financial sovereignty, for our families, and for our fundamental freedom. Do not let them dictate your worth. Do not let their failing paper drag your future down into the abyss. Secure your wealth in reality. Stay vigilant. Stay educated. Be the immovable anchor for your family when the emotional storm hits. This is John A.G. coming to you on a day that will echo in eternity. May 8, 2026. The day the music finally stopped, and the day the real work began. Thank you for being part of the Aurex family. I love you all. Stay strong, stay prepared, and I will see you in the next update.